There is an ancestral point working as a matrix knot in your body, waiting to be released. In the next few minutes, you will physically locate the epicenter where inherited trauma crystallized in your fascia and dissolve it using a neurobiological protocol that lasts between 2 and 4 minutes, producing measurable somatic responses. We're not talking about an abstract concept, but about a precise physical location where your body still vibrates as if the danger had never ended. Touching this point the right way deactivates the ancestral survival command that has been deciding for you for decades. Leaving this video now means continuing to obey a defense mechanism that was never yours, but which controls your breathing, blocks your decisions, and keeps you on constant alert, even when you're completely safe. What you're about to discover lies at the exact intersection between applied neuroscience, fastal anatomy, and hermetic wisdom translated into physical gesture. Before we teach you the protocol, you need to understand what this vibrational epicenter is, where it came from, and why it anchors all the pain you feel but can't put into words. This matrix knot works like a silent conductor behind all the tension you carry. Inherited trauma doesn't just float around in the emotional field waiting to be felt. It chooses a fascial convergence point, where a high concentration of nerve endings intersects with myofascial chain crossings. That's where it settles, like a permanent vibrational seal. From this epicenter, the defense command radiates throughout the entire autonomic nervous system, sustaining chronic alert patterns that you interpret as anxiety, stiffness, or emotional collapse without any clear cause. When you dissolve this epicenter, something profound happens. The other tension points naturally release because they stop receiving the contraction command that kept them active. This is not about massaging symptoms or temporarily relaxing muscles. This is about deprogramming the original command that sustains the entire pattern. Polyvagal theory and epigenetics show how threat-based information travels through generations and gets encoded in living tissue. But something even older is at work here. This knowledge about the points where the soul was wounded and the body crystallized that wound, as a pattern did not begin in neuroscience labs. It comes from traditions that understood the body as the living language of ancestral experience, and modern science is finally catching up with what has always been present in the deepest healing practices of humanity. In the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, priests were trained to identify body seals through conscious touch, regions where traumatic experience had become a structural pattern. In Hermetic texts, the human body is described as an alchemical vessel where the subtle becomes dense matter, and every distortion in the vibrational field takes form as distortion in the flesh. They knew that when the soul is wounded beyond the capacity for integration, the body takes on the role of holding that information in physical form. Stephen Porges mapped how the autonomic nervous system records threats in layers that bypass verbal awareness. Bessel van der Kolk showed that trauma remains active as sensory fragments embedded in tension and defensive postures inaccessible to the conscious mind. And Robert Schleip revealed that fascia processes emotional states as an active sensory organ. Bruce Lipton brought the understanding that emotional information crosses generations as silent cellular instructions. The matrix knot is the physical sum of that inscription, the point where ancestral time remained frozen in a state of danger. And now, you're going to learn how to recognize the signals this epicenter emits when it's active. This epicenter does not remain silent. It constantly sends out signals through the body, signals that you probably interpret as personal weaknesses or symptoms with no logical explanation. The matrix knot operates like ancestral broadcasting. From a single point, it radiates defense commands that show up as chronic tension, restricted breathing, and emotional collapses that seem disconnected from any real cause. There are 5 main regions where this epicenter tends to anchor itself, each one generating a distinct somatic language that reveals its active presence. When the matrix knot is located at the base of the tongue, you feel persistent tension in the jaw, even while sleeping. You wake up with clenched teeth, develop nighttime teeth, grinding with no clear dental cause. There's a constant lump in throat sensation that water doesn't relieve, difficulty expressing even basic needs, and words that get stuck before coming out. Your voice loses power, as if something is blocking your expression right at the source. When it anchors along the lower castal edge, the epicenter locks the breath above the diaphragm. You sigh often because the air doesn't complete its cycle. You feel pressure in the chest without any cardiac diagnosis, and anxiety arises without any clear trigger, just as a constant vibrational state. In the solar plexus, it shows up as a knot in the stomach that tightens in emotional situations. Nausea not caused by food, but by emotional intensity, and sudden collapses where your body loses strength without warning. In the inguinal fold, the matrix knot freezes pelvic mobility. You walk with locked hips, feel disproportionate sexual shame even in safe situations, and the vital creativity that should flow from the pelvis stays dormant, as if guilt were etched into that region. At the center of the sternum, it vibrates as emptiness, a feeling that something essential is missing. Even when everything looks fine on the outside, an emotional void that no achievement can fill. These symptoms are not random, and they are not disconnected. The anatomy of fascial chains reveals that every point in the body is linked to myofascial pathways that run through the entire system. A localized adhesion creates tension at a distance, like pulling a thread in a web and seeing distant points move in response. The knot in the jaw pulls on the cervical area, which compresses the shoulders, which restrict the chest, which limits breathing, which affects the diaphragm, which interferes with digestion. That's why regular massages, stretching sessions, and even well-meaning body therapies fail to resolve the tension for good. They treat the echoes, the secondary points that scream louder, but they don't touch the source of the command. The epicenter stays active, sending out the same defense signal, and within days, the symptoms return just as they were. Now, you're going to learn how to locate this point of origin with somatic precision and deactivate it using a protocol that speaks directly to the autonomic nervous system. Locating the epicenter requires sensory presence, not abstract intuition. Your body gives off specific signals when your hand finds the exact spot where the matrix knot is anchored. There's discomfort to the touch, not sharp pain, but a feeling of something's not right here, as if you've touched something that wasn't meant to be touched. Your breathing changes the moment your hand rests on the epicenter. It tightens, shifts rhythm, or becomes shallow, without any effort on your part. And there's an immediate autonomic response, an involuntary sigh rising from the abdomen, sudden salivation, warmth in your hands or feet, or tears that come with no conscious emotion attached. Once you've identified the point, the release begins with touch. Place 2 fingers, index and middle, on the epicenter, with steady, gentle pressure, just enough for the body to register presence without feeling invaded. The goal isn't to force a release, it's to let the tissue know you are here, aware, and that the danger has passed. Keep that constant pressure as you begin the next movements. Now comes the microsolation, movements of 2 to 3 millimeters, in slow circles or a gentle side-to-side motion, paced with a calm breath. This movement is not a massage, it's a mechanical invitation for the fascia to release its held tension. You are communicating with the nervous system in a language it understands as safety, small rhythmic movements that say, "You can let go now, I'm here." and nothing is threatening you anymore. Micro-oscillation disrupts the fixed contraction pattern without triggering new alarm. As you maintain the touch and oscillation, breathe using the 4-8 rhythm. Inhale through the nose, counting to 4. Exhale through the nose, counting to 8. This pattern activates the vagus nerve in its ventral mode, the state of the autonomic nervous system associated with safety, deep relaxation, and the ability to integrate experience when touch, oscillation, and breath work together. The nervous system receives a clear signal. It is safe to release the ancestral defense. Because the body is being guided by conscious presence in the present moment, and what happens next in your body is objectively measurable. The practice takes between 2 and 4 minutes per point. During the process, the body gives off unmistakable signs that the protocol is working. Deep sighs that rise spontaneously, sudden salivation, warmth spreading into the hands and feet, chest expansion as if there's finally space to open, and breath dropping into the lower belly for the first time in years. This is not a subjective experience or mental interpretation. These are measurable neurophysiological responses that confirm the autonomic nervous system is shifting out of threat mode and into a state of integration. When the epicenter dissolves, reorganization happens immediately and structurally. Shoulders that had been raised for years drop effortlessly. A jaw that stayed tense night after night finally relaxes. Breath that never reached the abdomen now flows freely and fills the entire body with oxygen. Posture changes without you needing to fix it. The body simply returns to its natural alignment, because it no longer has to maintain an invisible defense against something that isn't happening anymore. This happens because the matrix knot was the conductor behind all fascial compensations. Once it dissolves, the entire system regains its natural ability to distribute forces evenly throughout the structure without overloading specific areas. The myofascial chains begin to glide over one another with ease again, and the body finally remembers what it feels like to live without constantly bracing for a danger that never came. The vibrational field also realigns. Someone carrying an ancestral defense pattern lived in energetic dissonance. The body vibrated in survival, while the soul longed to expand. This internal split created cycles of self-sabotage, relationships that couldn't flourish, and projects that stalled before taking off. When the epicenter is released, decisions are no longer driven by invisible fear, but guided by inner clarity that no longer has to battle an inherited command. And now, you're about to see how this shows up in the life of someone who finally touched the right point. Maureen was 50 years old when a somatic therapist told her something that would change everything. Your anxiety is not in your mind. It's trapped in a specific point in your fascia, and you can touch it. The pressure in her chest she had felt since her 30s wasn't generalized anxiety or an undiagnosed heart condition. It was an active matrix knot along the lower costal edge. Cognitive therapy had explained the mental triggers, and antidepressants had adjusted her brain chemistry, but the feeling of suffocation remained, untouched, because no one had addressed the epicenter where the ancestral command was anchored. She only breathed up to her sternum. Everything below remained empty, tense, and out of reach. The therapist taught her the exact protocol you've just learned. Maureen lay down in silence, placed her hand over the lower left costal edge, and began to explore with sensory presence. When her fingers found the spot, her breath stopped immediately, a clear sign the epicenter was there. There was discomfort, a feeling of don't touch this, but she kept gentle, steady pressure, began the 2mm horizontal micro-oscillation, and started breathing in the 4-8 rhythm. In less than a minute, The first sigh rose from deep in her abdomen, involuntary, profound. Her hands warmed. Salivation came without warning. At 3 minutes into the practice, something gave way. It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was structural. Her breath dropped below the diaphragm for the first time in decades, filling the lower belly as if an internal barrier had been removed. Her shoulders relaxed without any conscious effort. Her posture shifted on its own. Maureen looked at the therapist with tears in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of physical relief. For the first time in years, there was space inside her own body to simply exist, without being in a constant state of alert. In the following weeks, decisions that once felt impossible began to flow naturally, not because she had learned better decision-making strategies, but because her body was no longer fighting against an ancestral freeze command. Maureen had touched the right point, and her nervous system finally responded. Now, you're going to learn how to seal that same transformation in your own body. What happened in Maureen's body does not hold through mental understanding. It anchors through somatic repetition. You'll know that integration is taking place when specific physical markers appear. Breath that drops naturally into the lower belly. Warmth that settles in the center of the sternum. A jaw that softens throughout the day. And a solar plexus that is no longer permanently braced. These are not subjective impressions. They are measurable responses from a nervous system that has shifted out of defense and into presence. To anchor this new state, repeat the signal gesture anytime you feel the old pattern trying to return. Touch the released point with 2 fingers. Apply gentle pressure. Perform the 2 mm micro oscillation while breathing 3 cycles in the 4/8 rhythm. This takes between 30 and 60 seconds and informs the body that the safety command is still active. When you notice tension creeping back in or decisions beginning to stall, use the return point. Think the phrase, "The danger is over." My body vibrates in the present. Breathe mindfully all the way to the abdomen and return to an upright posture with relaxed shoulders. This small ritual brings you back to your center without needing to redo the entire process. And what has changed can finally stabilize as a new way of being in your own system. You have crossed a threshold that most people never find. You've learned that inherited pain does not float in abstract dimensions. It has a physical location, measurable signals, and it responds to a protocol that speaks directly to the autonomic nervous system. The epicenter that once controlled unexplained tension, emotional paralysis, and silent self-sabotage can be deactivated because the body is not frozen. It's obeying an old command that has finally been given permission to stop. When the nervous system shifts from a threat state to a state of safety, something profound happens at the cellular level. Bruce Lipton showed that gene expression changes in real time. Genes linked to chronic inflammation, accelerated aging, and stress are silenced, while genes connected to regeneration, vitality, and creativity are activated. This is not about positive thinking or creative visualization. This is about real cellular reprogramming that occurs when the body finally vibrates in presence, not in ancestral defense. The Christian mystic Hildegard von Bingen wrote in the 12th century, "The body is the home of the soul, and the soul is the life of the body." What she knew and what science took centuries to validate is that body and soul are not separate. They are the language of each other. What God inscribed as vibrational potential in every cell, ancestral trauma tried to erase with survival commands passed down through generations. But the body always knew the way back. It was only waiting for someone to touch the right point. You now carry something that cannot be taken from you, the exact location of the epicenter where your pain was anchored, the protocol to dissolve it, and the understanding that freedom is not a philosophical concept. It is a measurable, somatic response. When you touch the right point, the body responds. And when the body responds, your entire life reorganizes. Not around the survival command that was never yours, but around who you truly are. The question is no longer, why do I feel this pain? It is, what will I create with a body that finally vibrates in freedom? Because releasing the epicenter is not the end of the journey. It is the ignition point of the life that had always been asleep, waiting for you to touch the exact place where everything begins to manifest. If this content resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This expands the field of knowledge and helps more people find their way back to a body that vibrates in freedom. If you feel this work is transforming your life, consider becoming a member of the channel. Your support allows us to keep creating deep content that impacts thousands of people around the world. I want to know how the epicenter of inherited pain showed up in your body and where you found this active ancestral point. Share in the comments. I release the matrix knot and free the epicenter of inherited pain. This affirmation seals your presence on the path of somatic awareness and anchors the transformation that has just taken place. Share this video with someone you know who carries unexplained tension, someone who's tried everything, yet still feels something invisible holding the body in an old pattern. And don't stop here. Click on the screen and dive into another transformative video on this channel. Because each protocol you learn brings you closer to the life that's always been waiting for you to touch the right point. Remember, inherited pain had a physical location, and you've just learned the language that dissolves it. Your body now responds to you, not to the ancestral command that was never yours.